Hello everyone and welcome back to the Justice for Aaron Brady campaign. We are continuing to scrutinise the podcast created by Nicola Tallant and Niall Donald entitled Crime World, where these two journalists created a podcast in relation to Aaron and to the case in respect of the mother of Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue at Lordship Credit Union. Now, we have called these people to task, I think now on 11 or 12 videos, and we're going to continue to do so. Now, we had, in our last videos, we had a brief look at how these two journalists just brushed over vital facts and information in respect of Daniel Cahill and Molly Staunton, who give evidence and testimony against Aaron. And the testimony was given from New York to a court here in Dublin. So we've had a quick look at Molly Staunton's testimony. We want to have a brief look now at Daniel Cahill's testimony and our serious concerns with Daniel Cahill as a credible witness. So to that end, we're going to listen to the same little clip again as we listened to in the Molly Staunton video, and then we'll have a look at what these two people have totally omitted from you, the Irish public. So let's have a quick listen to the clip now.
Reading of Irish law.
And part of the case against Aaron Brady was that he went to the States and boasted about what he'd done, that he went on nights out, and that he often spoke about the fact that he had killed a guard, and that he kind of made admissions while...
Yeah, I mean, there was witnesses produced in court, two witnesses, one of them a Dublin guy called Daniel Cahill, and a girl also called Molly Staunton. So both of those spoke, rather than go into the very ins and outs of it, but they both spoke about Aaron Brady speaking about it. It was described by the prosecution as wearing the murder of Garda Adrian Donoghue as a badge of honour over in the US, because shortly after the real investigation began, of course, Aaron Brady left the country. Mm-hmm. He first went to Boston and then ultimately ended up in the Bronx. And while he was in the Bronx, he was living in a place called Woodlawn, where there was a lot of Irish immigrants. And he was spending a lot of time drinking in a local bar there. And this is where the evidence came out of two people who knew him from the bar. They spoke about various incidents, not to get into it in specifically, occasions where he had one occasion where it was described he'd broken down and admitted it, other occasions where he sort of bragged about it and maybe had been in a fight and sort of described this as something to threaten the person who he'd been fighting with. Those people were ultimately those witnesses were ultimately presented to the court through the US law officials. So they kind of took the witness statements initially with the assistance of the Gardaí. Now, of course, the Aaron Brady campaign, has said deals were done for these, but those people stood up in court and gave evidence.
So there we have again our two intrepid reporters speaking about the most important part of Aaron's trial, the testimony from these two witnesses from America, and they have told you, the Irish public, we're not going to get into the ins and outs of it, and we're not going to get into it specifically. So they're more or less telling you, the Irish public, we're not going to give you any of the important details. So that's what we want to highlight there. And obviously in the previous video, we did have a look at Molly Staunton's testimony and the serious issues that surrounded that event. Now we're going to look at the testimony of Daniel Cahill and look at his credibility as a star witness, as he was described by I think it was Robin Schiller or Owen Reynolds, the star witness against Aaron Brady. And I suppose the best way to start at this is we're going to look at an incident that took place during the course of Daniel Cahill's testimony, where he has been cross-examined by Justin McQuaid, Aaron's defence barrister. And there was an intervention by Judge Michael White, and we want to have a look at that intervention in particular and how we say the corruption and coercion is systemic from the ground up to the very top. So I suppose the best way is to take you through that interaction. We're going to look at here an article from Patrick O'Connell, reporter in the Sunday World, and just going to look at a couple of paragraphs from this article. So this is in relation to an interaction during Cahill's testimony when he was being cross-examined by barrister Justin McQuaid. So the article reads, Cahill, whose character was subjected to outrageous slurs by defence counsel acting for Brady, almost single-handedly dismantled the web of lies the cold-blooded killer had spun in an effort to conceal the fact it was he who shot dead Detective Garda Donoghue at Lordship Credit Union in County Louth in 2013. In the face of threats and intimidation in what Gardaí described as the dirtiest trial in the history of the state, Daniel bravely testified as to how Brady had, on 3 occasions, confessed to Adrian's murder while in his presence. So that paragraph, I think, illustrates very well the tone of this article. And there's a little bit in it there, we just comment on, in the face of threats and intimidation, Daniel Cahill nor anyone else was ever threatened or intimidated by the Bradys or by Aaron Brady. Nobody, absolutely nobody has come forward to any of the authorities and made a complaint against either us, Aaron's campaign, or indeed Aaron Brady. So that is the base for this. Nobody has made a complaint. This idea of intimidation we've covered on numerous occasions is another facade, another curated story to muddy the waters, and it has been created by the authorities, the DPP and on Garda Síochána. So we can see once again here how the mainstream media is buying into a curated and a narrative that simply does not exist. Nobody has made any complaint against the Brady family. It's as simple as that. So the interaction continued. At one stage, the defence tried to suggest Daniel had been a member of the real IRA. During cross-examination, Justin McQuaid, BL, put it to Daniel that he had been a member of the Ryan crew or the Dublin Real IRA, a suggestion that trial judge Mr. Justice Michael White said was both outrageous and unacceptable. Mr. McQuaid said, "You are a member of the Ryan crew. By that I mean the Dublin Real IRA." Daniel replied, "That is completely false. I have never committed crimes like that." But Daniel did say, he said pictures of him could be found with Vinnie Ryan, but said, "You won't find me committing crime or involved in that activity." Mr. Justice Michael White later told the jury that Mr. McQuaid's line was an outrageous question. Mr. McQuaid apologised, saying he had overstepped the mark. So we have a situation here where Justin McQuaid has put questions to Daniel Cahill, and to all intents and purposes he was saved by Justice Michael White. So we have one of the most respected barristers in the Dublin courts, Mr. Justin McQuaid, highly, highly respected barrister in the Irish state. And with all people like this, they do not go down an alleyway blindly. Justin McQuaid did not ask that question for sensational purposes or any other purpose other than to get to the truth. Now, during the course of the cross-examination, a number of pictures was shown to the jury and to the court. And here we have Daniel Cahill with Alan Ryan. And here we have, it's from the Sunday World, picture of Daniel Cahill with Vincent Ryan, I think it says there, yeah. And we have a photograph that was shown to the court here. And this is a group of people who took part in a charity walk. And the banners they're holding up there is 32 County Sovereignty Committee, which I think is the political wing of the Real IRA. If I stand to be corrected now, but that's what I believe this to be. And if we look at the top left-hand corner of that picture, you will see Daniel Cahill there on the right, holding the flag with Alan Ryan. Now, this becomes somewhat questionable when Daniel Cahill's stance was that No, I wasn't friendly with the Ryans. I was friendly when I was a child. So any of those pictures we've shown there, Daniel Cahill was not a child. So you can see quite clearly the man is telling lies. He has purged himself. And we have a situation here where Daniel Cahill is sitting with a gentleman here. Daniel Cahill has his right arm around, and in the white t-shirt is a man called Dean Evans. And just about, I think 10 or 12 days after this photograph was taken, Dean Evans shot and murdered Peter Butterley in a car park in County Meath. Now, Dean Evans admitted to that murder and was duly sentenced, convicted and sentenced for the murder of Peter Butterley. And indeed, this picture was taken just 20 days after Detective Adrian Donoghue had lost his life. And during the course of his testimony, Daniel Cahill told us that he had never heard of the murder of Detective Guard Adrian Donoghue, wasn't aware of it. So I think everyone, the public will be more than aware. It was very heavily covered in the media, rightly so. And you would suspect these people here that Daniel Cahill is sitting with would have some interest in what is happening to and in and around members of An Garda Síochána. Notwithstanding that, we still have the issue where we look at a picture like this, and Daniel Cahill told the court under oath that he only knew these people when he was a child. So that was one of the mainstay of, and I think it would justify Justin McQuaid asking the question. So we take it another step now to when Justin McQuaid actually was questioning Daniel Cahill, and there was an interaction, and just bring up some of the text here now. There we go. And we can see Justin McQuaid said to Daniel Cahill, and I suggest that the reason that you took to the attic was concern about the fact that Homeland Security was at your door and your position in the United States of America was in jeopardy. Daniel Cahill said, if I had known Homeland Security was at my door, I would have answered it. I have answered the door to Homeland Security before. And Justin McQuaid, we had never heard this before. Justin McQuaid said, well, tell us about that. And Cahill says, I answered the door to Homeland Security before, that's it. When was that? He was asked. It was maybe 2 years prior. And what did they want? Justin McQuaid obviously wanted to know what Homeland Security were looking for. They wanted to search my house. And why did they want to search your house? I believe they were looking for Dean Evans. And Justin McQuaid obviously asked, Mr. Evans was in custody in Ireland. And Cahill says, obviously Cahill knew, for someone who didn't know anything about these people or wasn't interlinked with them in any way, said immediately, no, sir, he wasn't. So here we have a situation that creates a whole myriad of questions. So obviously we have the association of Daniel Cahill with Dean Evans. Dean Evans murdered Peter Butterley and went on the run. While he was on the run, obviously An Garda Síochána and authorities of Ireland were seeking him all over Europe and indeed in America. So An Garda Síochána and the authorities asked the American authorities to go to Daniel Cahill's apartment to look for Dean Evans. So it shows that An Garda Síochána have told the American authorities, we have a man here who is friendly with, has allegiance to, or has some connection with a terrorist group, and we believe one of those terrorists has just committed a murder and may be hiding in his apartment. So Homeland Security, duly obliged, go to Daniel Cahill's apartment looking for Dean Evans. Now the crux of the matter is here, at that moment in time, Daniel Cahill was an illegal immigrant. And Homeland Security are looking for a member of a terrorist organisation in his apartment. Is there any reason in the world why Daniel Cahill should not have been on the next plane out of America? He should have been deported immediately. He is illegal, and it would appear that he has association with and was friendly with and is friendly with members of the real IRA. So There was other information we had at the time, which we would have liked Defence Barrister Justin McQuaid to use. We knew that Daniel Cahill had been stabbed prior to leaving Dublin. Okay, and then Daniel Cahill went on to a podcast from America with his partner Jamie Brennan, that own a bar in New York, and he revealed in the podcast that, you can see here, Garda killer witness tells of escape from clutches of real IRA pals. And he goes into some details how he was stabbed. I get stabbed in the arm, I get stabbed in the leg, I get stabbed in the hand, and get stabbed in the side. So at a certain point, the shit hits the fan with these guys. They get into a feud with a load of other people, and I get stabbed. So on Garda Síochána must have known that this gentleman, Daniel Cahill, was stabbed 5 or 6 times. They never released or divulged that information to the Aaron's defence team, which is contempt no matter what way you look at it. But then we look at a situation where Daniel Cahill has good reason, shall we say, not to come back to Dublin. Because in these circles, I'm sure most people would understand and believe, if you get stabbed 5 or 6 times and you get away and you get out of Dublin, if that was you, would you want to be returned to Dublin? Or would you do whatever it takes to stay in New York? Of course, you're going to take the latter. You're going to do whatever it takes. So that was another reason that Justin McQuaid was aware of, but because we just didn't have that finite detail, and obviously the information wasn't put forward by the defence, I'm sure, or by the prosecution, I'm sure Brendan Grehan should have known about Daniel Cahill's past in Dublin. In fact, I'd say I know Brendan Grehan knows very well about Daniel Cahill's activities in Dublin just prior to being stabbed and just before leaving Ireland to go to America. And then we have the situation where Daniel Cahill tells us 2 years later, so he's allowed to stay in America, 2 years later, Homeland Security, ACE, the Immigration Removal Officer, the ACE officer is there at his apartment. NYPD is at his apartment on the 19th of June, I think, 2019. He's found with cannabis and he's found with steroids. And the man is still not deported. Now, we have an article, you can see here in this article, Kerry Bretz, one of the most senior immigration lawyers in New York, gave testimony in Aaron's trial, and he said Daniel Cahill should have been on the next available flight out of America. That's the bottom line in it. On that 19th of June, Daniel Cahill, his feet shouldn't have touched the ground, he should have been landed back to Dublin. A legal immigrant, marijuana and steroids. So that was the reason Justin McQuaid should have been allowed to follow that line of inquiry. Justin McQuaid didn't do it in a whim. Justin McQuaid, barrister for the defence, didn't do it lightly. Justin McQuaid studied all the photographs of Daniel Cahill with the Ryans and members of that organisation or association. So Justin McQuaid had a perfectly good right to ask that question. And then we have a situation again with the Irish press. I did show you this headline here before. There we have it. Daniel Cahill, as I said, went on to a podcast from his bar in New York, and he told us that he was stabbed numerous times. And here we have Patrick O'Connell again doing his very level best to sanitise what Daniel Cahill has told us and something about his character and what happened. And indeed, Daniel Cahill has done another podcast since, and I would urge people, I'll put the link to this podcast below. There's it there. It's The Naked and the Famous Tinfoil Hats. And Daniel Cahill makes a number of other revelations there with his friend Jamie Brennan, but nothing into relation to Aaron's case, but it does give an insight into the person we are dealing with here. I would urge people to have a look at certain parts of that. So, we've seen that Daniel Cahill, we say, is of a certain character. We are saying without a shadow of a doubt, he told a tissue of lies in respect of his interactions with Aaron and what Aaron said to him. And in the next few days, we will release the videos we've done previously in respect of Daniel Cahill's accusations against our son Aaron. But what I want to do now is just very quickly look at what we say is the calibre of witness that Daniel Cahill is. And we say that we can easily link Daniel Cahill to the likes of, you can see here, Garda and criminals, Daniel Cahill linked with Jonathon Dowdall. And Jonathon Dowdall, his suitability and credibility as a state witness. And we say these two men have very similar attributes, told lies to save their own skin. So let's have a look at what the authorities think of Mr. Dowdall and Mr. Dowdall giving evidence against Mr. Hutch. And just for completeness, you can see there, Mr. Hutch was represented by the man who prosecuted Aaron. The man who prosecuted Aaron was Brendan Grehan, and we'll have a look at his opinion now in a second. But this was the opinion of the trial judge. So in that little clip, it tells us what the authorities think of Mr. Dowdall. And we say Daniel Cahill fits into the exact same category. And you can see quite clearly there, just put up that little slide, Brendan Grehan, who was defending Mr. Hutch, said, Dowdall, a proven liar and a master manipulator who had turned the state's evidence against the monk to get off his own murder charge. And in her judgment, Justice Byrne said, it cannot be said that Dowdall found God and decided to do what was right. She said he acted out of his own self-interest. And you can see below a line from Daniel Cahill's testimony, no, I wasn't friendly with the Ryans. I was friendly when I was a child. So we can see the lies, we can see the proven liar, we can see he is a master manipulator. And indeed, Brendan Grehan went slightly further when he said, Defence Counsel Brendan Grehan, Senior Counsel for Mr. Hutch, argued that criminal proceedings were not simply a forum where stuff is put out there, and that there are always rules against scandalous matters. So that's Mr. Grehan's approach to what Jonathon Dowdall say. And we said you cannot separate the likeness between these two witnesses. Self-interest to protect themselves and tell a tissue of lies to generate that safety net for themselves. So that gives us a little bit, that's only a little bit of what Dowdall, or what, of what Talent and Donald omitted from this podcast when they told us not to get into the ins and outs of it and not to get into it specifically. Well, this podcast or this video here we are creating is getting into the ins and outs of it. This video we are creating, our Justice for Aaron Brady, is getting into it a little bit more specifically. And yes, the Irish media has completely overlooked all of these things. And I have said before in a number of videos we've done in relation to Daniel Cahill, we are 100% certain that Robin Schiller knows in great detail Daniel Cahill's activities just before he was stabbed and before he left Dublin. And I'm sure there's other members of the mainstream media. On Garda Síochána are fully aware of them, but obviously that wasn't disclosed to the Irish public, and it wasn't disclosed, more importantly, obviously, to Aaron's defence team. So I think that shows us once again what these two journalists are about, and their omission and their skipping over this vital information is absolutely, it is scandalous. It's disgusting, it's gutter pressed at its worst, or gutter pressed at its best. There can be no explanation for it. And I'm sure everyone can see what these two people are trying to do here. So once again, thank you for that. We're going to run a couple of videos now over the next few evenings in respect of Daniel Cahill's evidence. We'll go into more detail about the lies he told about Aaron speaking to him about the mother of Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue. But I just wanted to highlight here, the campaign wanted to highlight to you, the Irish public, the pathetic attempt by these two to cover up again for the Irish authorities, for Senior Investigating Officer Mark Phillips, and for Senior Counsel Mr. Brendan Graham. So thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment and share. Please subscribe. Thank you to all those who have subscribed. I think we're well over the 450 now, so obviously our target is 500. So please hit the subscribe button and help us fight against those that are trying to shadow ban us and block our social media sites. Thank you once again, and we'll see you all in the next video. Thank you.